I'm with Marc, who is Professor of Child Development at Early Start, and Cathrine Neilsen-Hewett, who is Director of Pedagogical Leadership at Early Start as well. And we're going to be talking about how children are experiencing the current crisis or catastrophe or difficulties around COVID-19, and also what educators and parents can do to support children in their feelings that they may have around what's happening. So I'm going to ask both of you a question, and you can decide who's going to answer that, or you might want to answer both in your own ways. What sorts of feelings are children having at this time around what is happening around them?
Yeah, I think young children are particularly vulnerable at this time, partly because of their lack of understanding and their lack of coping skills, and I guess their dependency on adults. So a lot of their experiences of COVID-19 comes through their disruptions that they experience in terms of their relationships and their experiences in their environment. So disruptions that they're experiencing in relation to routines, so they might not get to go dancing or get to play with their friends, or the birthday party that they're about to go to is no longer on, or the availability of their parents emotionally. So I think as adults, we're living with a certain level of uncertainty and stress, and that impacts the way we interact with children and also our emotional availability. So they might not be experiencing it directly as we do, but they certainly experience as a sense of loss.
Just add a couple of things, sort of more through a developmental lens, developmental psychology lens, is the children are very good at picking up information vicariously. So children are looking for how we evaluate things all the time, and they use it to modify their own behaviours. So if we express disgust at something, they'll be more cautious with that thing. If we express approval, they're more likely to engage with that thing. And so a lot of kids will be hearing this topic often in a very tense or fearful way. The tone will be one of fear. And what children do is they take that broader context to make an evaluation. So they'll be judging that this is something to be frightened of. This is something that's bad.
So at the moment we've got like 24-hour news cycles of talking about COVID-19, for example, and we had the same with the bushfires. So what would be your recommendation around, I think that people want to be authentic with their children, whether you're an educator or whether you're a parent, people want to be authentic. How much exposure is okay, or I think that would be useful for people to understand what that looks like.
Four-year-olds have an early developing sense of sickness and germs. They think of germs as living organisms that can do things, but they don't really understand how infection works, how disease works. Even where they have an idea that we have organs in our body, they don't really know where they are. So they're building up knowledge of the world. And one of the most important and richest sources of that information for children is verbal interactions with people who they trust. And they don't build that information up quickly, they build it up slowly. So giving them permission to ask a question through our own behaviour, through our own verbal behaviour, listening to what they say, creating an environment where they can come back and clarify, engaging on the topic when the opportunity presents itself, giving them the opportunity to come back again, will help them on that journey of building up the knowledge that they will need to properly understand these things. But we have to accept this fact. Most 4-year-olds will not understand COVID-19.
Well, I think most adults can understand it.
That's
part
true.
of the
That's true.
challenge, and I suppose that does lead to that question before we go on to thinking about supporting children. How do adults, how can they regulate their own feelings? Because as you say, children are picking up those cues from them. So how can adults regulate those and ensure that they're kind of feeling, I mean, no, we can't do that, but this is unknown for all adults.
We can. And I learned this through some work I did years ago in terms of social anxiety. Now, it's very difficult for a person to control the anxiety that they have, but what people, especially around lots of areas, what people are quite good at, not always, but often, is regulating how they present themselves to their child. Right? So we can be conscious of, okay, when I'm interacting with my child about this, I need to slow down. I need to model more relaxed behaviour. I need to listen. And I need to not overwhelm them with information. And those very concrete strategies, which you can even practice, actually they're sending those signals that this is an okay thing to talk about. This is something that's not overwhelming. This is something that's not too frightening. And we've seen that even parents who are highly anxious themselves can use those strategies with their children and interactions with their children to reduce the anxiety in the interaction and to send much more positive messages about the world to children. And so that's a reasonably well evidence-based reality.
And it's something that we often talk about with educators. We talk about the power of the pause and just really slowing things down. And it's about wearing that very intentional lens and understanding that the way that you interact with your child directly impacts on their well-being and their sense of security. So, and I think it's important to be reassuring to parents because these are anxious times, these are stressful times, and you absolutely need to tap into your own support networks and find people where you can have those conversations, because those conversations are important to be had, but not in front of children. So it's really about monitoring their level of exposure, and when they are exposed to these kind of conversations, to ensure that there is a consistent message. And that's particularly important for educators who are continuing to work with young children, is that there is a consistent message given to children. So check with their parents, find out what kind of messages children have been given and make sure that you mirror those.
Yeah. Can I just before we go on, just jump in two very practical things. One is you can monitor yourself to see if you're catastrophizing. So catastrophizing is when you're going down that path of, and then someone will die or something terrible will happen. If you're catastrophizing and you're externalizing it, you're saying it, you have to wash your hands so that you don't get really, really, really sick, right? No, you wash your hands so that we don't spread this sickness to other people. So you put that in a kind of procedural, factual narrative, not in a catastrophic narrative. And that helps children think about the reality of what's going on, and it helps you change your own response. The other thing that you can do is you can help children focus on other people. And that's a very, very powerful strategy. If you think about what empathy really is, empathy is where I start to concern myself with somebody else's position. And that's a very powerful thing to do with a child, is to say, oh, we've got to make sure that Nan's all right, so let's make her some cookies, or let's make sure that we clean all the handles so she doesn't get sick. And the kid is more powerful then. They can act in the world, they can do good things, and they're caring for someone else. And that also reduces their anxiety at the same time.
And that sits really nicely with the Ways of Wellbeing framework, which is about giving and sharing, and that's really empowering for children because it gives them a level of control at a time where they feel like they don't have any control because everything's stopping.
So acting in the world is very important there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk briefly about educators who, at this time when we're recording this, we still have early childhood settings open and educators doing what I consider to be an amazing job and taking an amazing role right now that really cannot be praised enough. First of all, to be in place supporting children and supporting families, and also sometimes doing that with their own fears.
And their own children who might be at home.
That's right. So what about educators? What are some really practical things? You touched on that, Cathrine, but some really practical things that educators can do to support children at this time when they're in their early childhood settings.
I think one of the things that we need to recognise is this is coming off the back of the bushfires. So educators are already really focused on trying to re-establish a sense of security and normalcy,
safety
and routine within their service. And I think about a lot of what will help children and families now is really what's typical of high quality practice. So it's really valuing that relational pedagogy and developing those safe and responsive relationships. It's around our connections with families are critical at times like this in terms of establishing those communications. But I think it's also around other kinds of practices that happen within that early childhood context. So play becomes so critical at times of stress, because play is such an important platform for children to actually work through their feelings and their emotions and their understandings. But even more important than that, as adults, it provides us with a window into children's understandings of situations. Look at keeping routines to typical routines, because children take great comfort from the familiar. And we're all looking for what is our new normal. And when we're setting routines, it's about giving children a voice in what those routines look like. So giving them some sense of control. I think that's really important. And looking after one another as pedagogues and as educators. And that's critical. The strength of your team is really important for the functionality of what's happening within your service.
Just on that question of routines and structures, I couldn't agree more. And giving children a role, but also making it very clear and obvious. There are certain approaches where children actually have a representation of the day. And if you're in a moment where there's elevated stress, or that you're in communities where there's a high level of disorganisation, or if you're trying to bring about a change, and you might need to bring about changes because of smaller eating groups already occurring in early childhood services, then finding a way to represent...
Circle time.
Yeah, finding a way to represent the day for children is very powerful. So what we're doing at different times. It doesn't mean that children always need that, but it can be very helpful. It's a great tool, and especially when there's more anxiety around, it provides a sense of more control over the environment, and more they can manage their expectations and they know what they're going to need to do.
And just touching on something that you said there, Marc, I think the other thing for educators is to be aware that children will be stressed, and because of their lack of language, stress often manifests itself as behaviours or changes in behaviours. So it's being aware and a lookout for those shifts in behaviour. So a child might become more aggressive, or they might be less responsive and withdraw socially, or they may regress in skills. Often at times of challenge we see challenges, or at times of stress we see challenges in terms of children's self-regulation. So they might need more prompting or more scaffolding or support. They may have difficulty paying attention or following instructions. So it's really about being supportive and understanding of those changes.
And as you say, maybe just pausing to reflect on what's happening and what that child is trying to, or is inadvertently telling you as a result of that stress. So just pausing and understanding that that's what's happening, and reflecting on that yourself as well, because that can often be what's happening.
So then we might see separation or clinginess, and the communication, like you said, is saying, you know, I'm looking for someone who I trust and someone to be with.
And that's hard sometimes for parents and for educators who might have taken a child on a journey of separating from their family, and now they're back there again. But I guess it's that strong feeling that it's okay, we can do all of that again, and the world will change in a different way. So maybe just to sort of round this out and to finish on a well, I think it's been really positive. Is what are some of the tips you would give for doing some really? We might have children at home with their families, or we will continue to have children in early childhood settings with educators. So what are some joyful, stress alleviating activities to all do together that will, you know, bring that sense of joy and playfulness?
I liked finishing off like that, because I think it's really important to give ourselves permission to have fun and for children. So it's about, I mean, this is an opportunity for families to reconnect and to slow down. So it's about having those times where you're cooking in the kitchen or you're playing with children. I mean, there's so many opportunities to kind of engage and to dance and to be active and to spend time together, to make up board games.
I think finding things that we can do together is the key. I have children from 15 to 4 years of age, and that's quite a developmental sweep. We dance together. that's fun. We
Well,
play.
it might be fun for you.
It's fun for us. We play Uno together.
Yeah.
But
We're doing board game of the week.
but I'll say this, it can't be all the time, right? So again, because we're actually going through this at the moment, having the structure in place and having those times. Okay, when it's time to stop socialising with your friends, to stop, playing, to come together. It's together time. That demarcates a space, and in that space, people have permission to do something different. So creating the space for that time is the first thing that has to happen, and getting agreement around that's what we're going to do in this time. It doesn't have to be very long, but to know that it's there and that it's part of it, and it's something we can look forward to. It's really very important.
Maybe some alone time as well.
Absolutely.
Would be required in a home with all ages, and it's time to, and this could be a good time to learn how to be on your own with other people. So that could be something. And I love the idea of baking some biscuits or whatever. That is something that children are acting and they're
reading out loud again.
Yeah.
Just children are a bit older, just going back to out loud reading.
Sharing your favourite books from childhood.
Is there anything else that you would sort of commend to educators or to parents?
Yeah, with so many people are digitally enabled these days, right across society actually, handheld devices. Making things for other people and putting them up online. So you might have a cousin who can't visit or something like that, so you make a message. Or my children once did a video series which I'm thinking of rejuvenating. You remember the Deadly 60 or whatever? There used to be a nature documentary, Deadly 50 or something like that.
No, but I'll be
so they made their own version of it, which was like the Deadly 4 or something. And so it was stuffed animals, and they went all David Attenborough, and they made a little documentary and then put it up online and sent it to their cousin. So doing things like that to connect them with their wider family group or their wider social group, I think that's really fun, and you're learning while you do that as well. And you can do a lot of that on a device. You can edit a simple video on a device. There are online videos of how to do it. So it's device time, but it's not device time as you know it. It's actually about reaching out and communicating and learning new skills. And I think that's pretty good fun.
Absolutely, that idea of not letting the physical isolation translate to social isolation. So it's being really intentional and active around continuing those connections. One of our very dear family friends, it was her daughter's birthday yesterday, and she had to cancel the birthday party. So all of the people that were coming to the birthday party connected in a Zoom party room.
Zoom party room.
And connected that way.
Very different, but some great connection.
Absolutely.
Okay, well that was wonderful. Thanks, Cathrine, and thanks, Marc.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Leanne.